everybody. Welcome to Dojo Talks Feedback. And I came up with the idea, maybe because I'm a boomer GM, it would be nice to have a more long form place for people to put feedback. In the Discord, it sometimes gets lost in the thread. It's hard for me to find once it happens. So we created this and it's worked out really well. We got a lot of very articulate responses. And one of the things I was hoping for is that could spur us to have a more, instead of a day-to-day, like putting out the fires kind of thing that we're doing, to have a bigger picture view of what we'd like to do, big picture wise, to make the dojo training program even better. And maybe even long term, we can think of it like we started the program in May of 2022, and maybe May 2023, we can do some kind of bigger overhaul, but also will happen slowly in an incremental way as well.
Dojo training program 2.0.
That's right. We could do 2.0 at some point.
Nice.
Okay, so what we've all read through the feedback, very articulate, and we kind of divided it into a bunch of different topics. And the first one, I guess I would describe as regimentation, people asking for a more detailed plan. And so the thing about a plan that's very compelling is like it takes a lot of the guesswork out for the person doing it. And I have a lot of sympathy with it. And one of the metaphors that's been brought up is weightlifting. And so for those of you who aren't into weightlifting, I'm not really a great big weightlifter, but this is the one people in the feedback have returned to it. And so I just want to share what that vision looks like, right? Okay, so imagine we're talking especially powerlifting, no clean and jerk or stuff. We're just talking like bench press, maybe overhead press, maybe squat, maybe deadlift. In fact, not maybe. Those are your lifts, boss. And then the idea would be like, all right, I'm going to write it down what you're going to do every week, right? I'm going to write it exactly down. And then there's a dream that every week you do a little bit more, let's say 5 pounds more. It's a beautiful dream, and it's nice because it's measurable. So then the question becomes from a lot of our participants, our people, well, can't we do that in the chess world? Can't you just tell me what to do every week? And my answer for the last couple months has been like, no, we can't. And my answer has been like, concentrate first on studying your own games. And then if there's something that's going on within your cohort, whether it's analyzing classic games or sparring, then do that. But people want more, okay? More. And that's what we're going to discuss first. And so I'll send it over to either Kostya or David, whoever wants to
Yeah,
pick it
yeah,
up.
yeah. So, right, I've got this question multiple times. The first, there's a question of like, yeah, can you just tell me what to do on a daily basis, like a
Right.
specific day by day training plan, which I think works great in the fitness world.
Mhm.
And I do know our site has that functionality where you can like kind of like day by day people log in, they check in, and it's like it just tells them like here's what you need to study today, and then they can check off that they finished that day's work, and it's just like a very self-motivating training plan because you're just going day by day and you're knocking stuff out. So I think that's a very legitimate thing to do. I think when we created our program, our envisioning was more that people have all kinds of different schedules and lives. And so
Right.
they're just going to figure out for themselves like when they can work on chess. Not everyone can work on chess every day. A lot of people work more on weekends, like compared to weekdays, right? So it's hard to like give a plan because it's definitely not going to work for everyone to study like a whole lot every single day. So yeah, we just have to kind of maybe we can even do different kinds of plans where we give one for just like the ultimate improver. They have 24 hours a day, they can do as much as they want, versus like the average working adult that can maybe only fit in like 1 hour 1 to 2 hours on a weekday max, and then maybe can do a little bit more on a weekend. So I think that would be another thing for us to think about. And then on the question of, because I get this, I see this question in Discord all the time, and I think I saw it in the feedback as well. It's just like, well, what are the most important things to work on? I think every time we get this question, because we've answered a couple of times, we always say like focus on playing games and then analyzing those games. And then if you
Mhm.
have time for chess outside of that, then I would say like you can work on your tactics, you can work on your sparring. It's like like whatever you want to do, wherever you think you need to do next, that's kind of up to you. But like game analysis and then or playing games, game analysis, that's always going to be like the most important thing. We have that kind of like first in the training program. We have that first now in the scoreboard. It doesn't mean you can't do other stuff if you're not playing, but I think we'd all agree that that is the first thing someone should do if they want to improve their chess. They should probably play some chess and then review those games. But to be fair, I'm not sure if we like explicitly have stated this somewhere. Like maybe it's in like a guide somewhere, but it's not like front and center like on the program or like in the frequently asked questions page. So I think that's something we can definitely be more clear about. Like the most important thing is playing games and game analysis, and then from here, like here's what you can do after that if you have if you have more time during a day or during the week.
I mean, like you guys, I've received this question a lot of times, and up till now, my cheap answer to it, and it's not an answer I don't stand by, but it's a very easy answer. My cheap answer up to this point was always just, well, you got to do everything, so it doesn't matter the order. Like
Right.
just start doing things on the list. Like whatever you feel like. Some people like to start with low hanging fruit. Some people like to start with whatever's first. Like I don't care. You just have to do everything. Okay. And I do believe that like without knowing somebody personally, it's not like we can know that you got to like play a game first and then do your like sparring, right? Like versus if you do your sparring and then play your game, like it's not likely to lead to a particularly different outcome. So everything just does have to get done. But there's so many people who want that extra scaffolding, right? Or that extra piece that they have to be right that they want it. And I'm happy to fulfill that need that they have, right? So I had started working on this thing of laying out a weekly schedule. And the way I did it was I made like a lit, and maybe you guys have seen what I started to do or like it or don't like it, but I structured it based on a week instead of day to day because I'm not going to tell somebody your classical game's on Monday versus it's on Sunday, right? Like they know which day they can play a game, but I give them like a list of here's everything to do within 1 week, and hopefully that helps break it down compared to here's everything to do for a year, which is kind of what the training program might tell someone otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting idea. I think there will definitely be people that just want like the day by day breakdown, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's a way to get around that problem. Maybe you could say, because a lot of fitness programs are structured like this. They're like day one is
Yeah.
chest day, day two is back day, and then
Sure.
Yeah.
they just decide when day one is for them. So that could be Sunday when they play the game, Monday wherever. So
Sure.
I think there are ways
Or
around
we
that, but
might
it's
like
definitely a good start.
even with that template, I might say, play a classical game day one, review a classical game day two, do sparring day three or something like that. But someone comes to it and they're like, well, I played my classical game on Monday. I don't have any time free on Tuesday to review it, so I can't do that on Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like you don't know when people have breaks in their week or when somebody has like somebody, let's say two players who have 8 hours in a week. One of them's got 8 hours on Saturday and the other person has 1 hour every single day
Yeah.
and two on Sunday or something, right? Like I don't know that there's like an easy way for us to like break it down to them like every single minute they're gonna do on which day.
But you know what? I think let me try to address where I think the question's coming from because we do get a lot, right? Um, for example, in your sample training program that you put up here, which is a good first stab at it, right? You have like games, analysis, tactics, book, games of study, and then other. And I think what their anxiety is that people are trying to address is you come to the training program, there's all these boxes. And sure, we tell them that going over your games is the most important, but then they're looking at all the boxes and they're like, dude, which one do I do? Just tell me which one I do, boss.
Right.
Just tell me. And I guess I kind of get that, right? In my envisioning of the program, I was like, yeah, do what you enjoy first. And then the stuff you hate the most is probably going to be what is going to improve your game the most, right? But you'll probably do the things that you enjoy first. We've seen on the scoreboard, most people are checking off the puzzle rush, for example, right? So that was my original intuition. But I think if we did something like this, it would need to be really like, this, and this is what you need, boss. It's got to happen.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think these programs are not that difficult to design, so we can offer
Mhm.
different things and see what works. But yeah, it's clear that there's a lot of people that do want that kind of like day by day guidance, which I totally, I mean, which I totally relate with, like,
Right.
because that's basically a lot of other kinds of training programs are just like, yeah, here's what you do, day one, day two, and so on.
And maybe even the way to address it, if we did what we could call, if we could borrow from the CrossFit world, you could talk about programming, right? In the sense that you just with fitness stuff, where you could try to make it as varied as possible, like CrossFit does, that you could build a program which is like, all right, we're building these different things, but we're not going to do one thing all the time. We're going to vary it up in terms of hitting all of the bases, hitting all the bases. So we don't just do leg day all the day, every day. Um,
Yeah.
though that does go contrary to something, Kostya, that I know you kind of like to espouse, which is just focus on one thing for a
Right.
while.
Yeah. I was just gonna bring this up. Yeah. So for
Yeah.
me, I've I don't know. I've always been a believer, yeah, in just focusing on a specific thing that you're trying to work on. So,
Yeah.
okay, calculation is very important. So when I was like working on my calculation, I would just do 90 minutes a day, sitting OTB, solving problems, writing down my answers, super disciplined. And then the rest of the day, I was just like, okay, whatever you want to do. You want to go through games, you want to look at openings, like you did your main work. And then at the end of like 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I would just kind of choose a different thing. And I would definitely feel like a big boost to the calculation. And then maybe for the next 6 weeks, I would focus on an endgame book, like endgame strategy or game collection. Today I'm just, every day I'm going to go through 3 tall games, and then whatever else I do outside of that, whatever. But that's going to be my main focus. And I think that's a great strategy for some folks because slow and steady gets the job done. So you go through one book, you go through the second book, before you know it, you've gone through tons of stuff. It's not as exciting as like, all right, tactics day one, end games day two, game, day three. And I think you could still do that. But I would, yeah, my encouragement would be everyone's playing games. You got to play if you're working on your chess. You got to analyze your games. And then outside of that, I would say choose one thing. You're working on your end games for the next month. You're working on your calculation for the next month. You can choose a specific book, whatever. But that's kind of how I would suggest to do things. But it's not the only way.
You've
And
got
actually,
my vote though, Kostya. So
Oh,
one thing
cool.
too, where this makes it's easier than the fitness world, honestly, is an important difference is in the fitness world, like the reason you got something like a weekly schedule is you don't want to blast whatever muscle group one day and then blast the same one the next day. You're toast. You're fried, dude. You're fried. So it makes sense to take the days off from there. But right, with chess, there's no reason to take days off in between whatever it is you're working on. Um, so
Yeah, I
right,
would say there's the opposite effect there where, yeah, if you're
right.
taking in too much knowledge, it's going to be very hard to retain everything. So yeah, that's always the fear I have when someone says like, okay, I'm going to do 30 minutes of like studying this endgame book and then 30 minutes
Mhm.
of tactics, is that like you're probably not going to remember a lot of the endgame stuff that you read, especially if it's some kind of endgame algorithm. They show some technique, like you read it once and you don't really practice it. I feel like you probably don't remember a lot in the long run.
yeah,
Maybe what we could do then is, first of all, these people, actually, there's a lot of people out there who have their own ideas about this. They could share it with us and we could workshop it on the Discord. But maybe a basic way of doing it is to say, if we're going to go Kostya's method, which I have a lot of sympathy with, is to create a hierarchy of things that we think like, let's say there's an order to. So you're always going over your games, but if that is done, then this is the thing you're working on, for example,
yeah.
right? Maybe it's the Bulgar maiden twos, maybe it's something else, maybe it's the sparring, maybe, all these different options are available to you. Then the Kostya method is to like knock it out and then go to the next thing.
Right. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
do have kind of a natural inbuilt hierarchy because we have the program on the site, which is kind of built vertical, top down. So people see, the welcome and then the games and analysis. That's the first thing. And then I
Right.
think the second thing we have is tactics, but it's not really said like, okay, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and that's not how we do it either, because it's not like, we're definitely not saying you have to play your 50 games and only then you can work on tactics, or then you can work. No, you're playing your games and working on your chess simultaneously. Of course, it's different. Again, actually, for people that are playing like one game a week versus players that are kind of like more traditional tournament players. So they're playing like a tournament, like 5 games in a weekend, like very very intense, or 9 games over 5 days,
Right.
and
Mhm.
then maybe not playing for like another month. So they're doing a lot of training in between then, and then they have like another tournament. Where some people, they play one game a week and then they don't have these like kind of bigger events, but yeah, they're playing one game a week and then they're kind of studying throughout that week as well.
Now, maybe I should address another thing about this. So, if you imagine in terms of time, let's say you decided that you wanted to crush the puzzle rush, your puzzle rush requirement for your rating band. Might happen in a day, might happen in an hour, might take 6 months, you don't know, right? And with Kostya's method, which I kind of like, is just like, well, you're going to be on it until you do it, boss. You're going to be on it until you do it. And if you have to mix it up, I mean, there's other things definitely to do, because obviously you can overdose. you
Mhm.
know, but like Ghost just said, an hour and a half a day might be the kind of way to approach it, just until you try to crush a specific goal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, hang on,
but
hang on though.
wait, let me
We're
just bring something
crushing
up
it.
because I
Okay.
want to finish. So the thing that a lot of people are saying, and this, I have a certain amount of sympathy with this, is a lot of people are saying, boss, we need to program in like either a puzzle of the day or a tactics requirement of the day. And a lot of people believe that. I have a certain sympathy with it. I try to tell them that the tactics are all there in their games. They don't hear me when I say that, but they want like a specific number of, let's say, tactics of whatever kind in any given day. And so that's something also we could work with.
Okay. I want to say about like it could take 6 months. And maybe Kosti will disagree with me, but I'm a fan of like sort of like focused mini units. And I would say you do a pass for 3 or 4 weeks on like improving your tactics. And if you haven't made the goal, then you just know that you're going to make another pass at tactics later, but you would move on to another topic. I wouldn't do 6 months in a row of puzzle rush just because tactics are a weakness of mine and I haven't yet made that goal and not work on anything else. So I would go do all the end game materials for my level for 3 or 4 weeks, a mix of reading something in Silman, let's say, and doing some sparring positions, right? And hopefully I would get some success there. And then I would, come back around after, maybe 3 mini sessions, I'd come back around to my tactics.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I think right, grinding for 6 months on one topic seems very 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 much overkill. And if someone works on their tactics, I think for like 4 to 6 weeks consistently, I think they're already going to see a ton of progress. And then I don't know, that's always the point where I kind of started to burn out, where I just felt like, okay, I'm not really super into this anymore, and I've already felt like I improved a lot. So then I wanted to kind of focus on something else. But yeah, people can, I guess, adjust. But to me, 4 weeks, like a month, or 6 weeks at a time, definitely seems reasonable. And I guess it could be as simple as just having a just a flexible thing where it's like, okay, you have your games, you have your analysis, and then you have one like major, right? Like you have a focus that you choose. Then okay, you do your focus 90 minutes a day. If you have a bonus time for whatever, then you can do like going through a game, or maybe a quick sparring session, I think could be useful, right? But yeah, maybe we could kind of break it down like that, where maybe it's up to the student to choose their focus, what they think they need to work on, but we kind of schedule it like, okay, well then do that, 60 to 90 minutes a day, 5 days a week, for example.
Okay. Well, how about this? Let's create some sample plans, and then we can workshop with people. There's people in our Discord who are very into this topic. So we could like put it out there and create some schedules, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great, man.
Hey, you
Um,
guys, what about my question? I was thinking maybe we could take some schedules for one of the, very highly populated bands, like somewhere in the middle, 1,000,
mhm.
1,200, something like that, where
Yeah.
there's just tons of people. And we could hand those over to them and just get like a week of feedback on it. and then build out the plans for all the other levels.
Sure, we could definitely try to workshop it like that. Yeah.
Because I think otherwise, it's probably about like an hour to put together the plans for like one or two bands. So we could put in like 50 or 20 hours and then like just want to delete it all or revise it all. So maybe get feedback from one band, give them a couple schedules, and then work the others out.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Um,
All right.
okay.
Next feedback subject.
Yeah.
Next feedback. Yeah.
Next topic I think we had was time controls, right?
Time control, right.
Which is a big one. Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
let me catch people up to speed because this is a complaint we've gotten since the beginning, since even before the program launched.
And we knew we were gonna have it. We knew we were gonna
Yeah.
have it this way.
Yeah,
I mean, Jesse, Kostya, and I had no holds barred brawls about the time controls even before anyone had heard about it or given us any feedback.
Yeah, that's right.
right. So yeah,
I
it's
made
like,
concessions.
it's like the
I made
ratings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Jesse made concessions in order not to lose the vote. So you can see, like, when you get into like a political situation, how like compromise can come up.
So for everyone listening, let me just explain how the program kind of works right now. One of the program's core tasks is to play a certain amount of classical games and then analyze and annotate those games. In order for a game to count as classical, we have enlisted certain standards based on people's ratings. So if you're under 800, then we're saying a minimum time control of 30 minutes plus 15 seconds is good enough. That can be online, OTB, it doesn't matter. But 30 minutes plus 15 is kind of like a minimum that we would count as like a long game where you can develop like your deep thinking and really get into it. I mean, I think we all think for us like 30 minutes is pretty quick, but okay, for players under 800, I think that's reasonable because a lot of them, they start out playing like Blitz and like Fast Rapid, and that's really, really way too fast. So at least G30 plus 15. For 800 to 1200, our minimum requirement is 45 minutes plus 15 seconds. For 1200 to 1600, it's 60 minutes plus 30-second increment. We introduced a 30-second increment here. A lot of like OTB events are pretty much just using 30-second increment time controls nowadays, so it makes a lot of sense to start kind of practicing using that time control. And then for 1600 plus, if you're in the program, 1600 plus meaning like 1600 is like your FIDE rating or a little bit higher, USCF, online, etc. Then we're saying the minimum is 90 minutes plus 30 seconds, which is essentially the minimum time control you'll see in like a classical like OTB event nowadays. Like I'm going to be playing a tournament tomorrow, which is 90 plus 30, but a lot of events have like the second time control. They're like even longer than that. But 90 plus 30, this seems to be kind of like the main standard nowadays. Okay. So a couple things to clarify. These are kind of like our suggestions, right? And we're going to say like if you play a game that like counts for the program, it has to meet this one of these minimum time controls, right, for your rating. Mm-hmm. These time controls definitely don't work for everyone, especially people that are only playing online games. They don't really like online classical, which I think we totally sympathize with. Like all of us prefer playing classical OTB. We don't really play a lot of classical online ourselves. So I get that. But okay, for some players, they can't play OTB at all. They have to play online. And so, yeah, they don't love playing online classical. Other players, they just prefer to play faster time controls. And then there's a very specific critique, which I sympathize with quite a bit, in that there's lots of players out there that have kind of like local OTB events that don't quite fit our time control. So for instance, there's a lot of like G75s out there, or I think I saw someone who asked about like a G90 plus 5. So instead of the 30-second increment, it was like a 5-second increment, right, or a 5-second delay, which is very, very close. And to me, it still feels like a long game. And the key point I want to just quickly bring up is like, for me, I feel like OTB games kind of do have more impact than online games. They're like less distractions. You're there in person. If you're an OTB player, then OTB is kind of like what it's all about. So I feel like I would rather have someone play a slightly shorter OTB game than a 90 plus 30 online game, if that makes sense. So yeah, a lot of people don't love the requirements. I do want to say though that it's like if you're let's say 12 to 1600, your requirement is 60 plus 30, and then you end up playing like a 45-minute game because you're in like the Lee Chess League 45-45. So okay, that maybe won't count for our program. I still think that's could be a very instructive game, could be a very useful game. Like 45 minutes is still a long time, especially if you use that time. What happens in a lot of these games is that whether you start off with 60 minutes or 90 minutes or 45 minutes, both players just blitz out their moves and the game is done with both players having a ton of time left on their clock. So none of those games are like really like actual like legit classical games, and that's kind of like the bigger issue. So it's really more about spending your time. So if you play like a 45-45 game and you take your time, and then I think you could still get a ton of value from that game, but we still have to be like very, very rigid about our requirements, because if we start like lowering, then who knows what's okay. And I think we would generally agree that there is a very significant difference between like a 45-45 and a 90 plus 30, right? Like the 90 minutes is way longer. You have a lot more time for like longer things, deeper things, and ultimately probably going to be better for your chess. Okay. Yeah, where do you guys stand on all that?
Sorry, I'm raring to get in on this.
Yeah.
So first of all, one simple clarification is that I think if the minutes plus the seconds add up to line up, like the main time control plus the increment, if that lines up, that would be okay, right? So like 90 plus 30, or like 100 plus 20, or like 80 plus 40, those would be pretty similar, right? So if somebody's saying, oh, I can't find 30 plus 15, but they can find a 45 plus 0, I think that counts. It's basically the same amount of time if the game lasts 60 moves, right? So I think if the minutes of the main time control plus the increments add up to the same numbers, the numbers we give, that's fine. It's sort of like a different approach to the same amount of time. So if that Lee Chess League is 45 plus 45, that would count for people looking for a 60-30, but it would definitely not count for people looking for a 90-30.
So I don't fully agree with that, because so number one, you said you base it off 60 moves. I think you could also base it off like 40 moves, I think is reasonable. And then
sure, you could.
You would kind of have less flexibility. But the other thing is, I think just psychologically, starting with more time means you're more likely to think longer versus like having a bigger increment. Then okay, you'll have more time for the rest of the game, but I still feel like having like 60 minutes versus 45 minutes, if you start with 45, you're a lot closer, I think, to time trouble than at 60, right? So you just kind of, and then 60, I think you're a lot closer than 90, right? So even if the increment kind of matches up, I don't know, I would put the focus on the starting time control, and then I would say the increment matters less personally. Like starting with 90 minutes to me is more important than whatever the increment ends up being.
Wow, so we're not going to agree on anything. Okay, the other point I was going to say is, if people play a game that doesn't count for the program but is still like an interesting, good game, there's no harm in that, right? Like if somebody goes to a tournament and they play some 90 plus 5s, cool, that's probably really awesome for them. I wouldn't check them off on the program because they didn't play 90 plus 30. And we have to have like a line where we have a cutoff. So I would say the 90 plus 5s don't count for our program, but surely they're going to count for that player's development. So they should absolutely go play those games. And like the point of playing a game is not just to check it off in the program, but actually to play. So if somebody's got a club where they're consistently playing time controls that don't match our requirements, they should still go play. It's still fun and they'll still learn, but they can't cross it off. Another suggestion I would have for people in that situation is just take over your club, right? I mean, there's got to be like a few other dojoers at your OTB chess club, and just tell the club, like, look, you're having us play, 75 minutes every week, and we'd like to play 90 minutes.
Yeah. Let me read one of these, because this is, I think, indicative. So I love its first sentence, by the way. I need more reps. I need more reps. I think there should be more emphasis on playing more chess. This guy is in the 1,000 to 1,100 cohort. So he gets to actually play at shorter time controls than 90-30. I love the long time controls, but unfortunately, I can't play a 3-hour chess game every day. I can, however, play a rapid game or two multiple times a week. I think it should be treated the same way as classical games. Track how many you play and analyze each one. We have to play and analyze 30 classical games. I think it would be helpful to play and analyze 120 rapid games. So let me just respond to this. I am, by the way, the hardliner. The hardliner in this discussion. And first of all, if you want to play rapid games or blitz for fun, fine. If you notice I'm doing a speed run, it feels like I'm being a hypocrite. I'm just doing it for fun. I have no illusions. I have zero illusions that my chess is being helped. Maybe I am developing maybe some thoughts about the opening, and I'll as I review the game, but I'm not improving my chess, as an art. So one of the things I really want to stress is I did a video I was very happy about called The Two Kinds of Thinking in Chess. And I really want to stress that unless you are thinking long, you're not actually getting better at anything. You're just rehearsing whatever intuition it was that you had before. And not only that, but playing longer games will actually improve your blitz because you're getting a sense of different structures and tactical patterns on a deeper level that then you'll get good at, right? And then be able to reproduce when you're playing quickly. So I want to say about this. Let's say to this one guy who was very common critique of our program. Something I want to stress is you don't have to play a gazillion games. And even if you imagine 30 classical games taking you weeks and weeks and weeks, it's important to see that let's say you just play one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks. If you spend time on that game, analyzing it. By the way, you don't want to analyze a game that people haven't thought of. I'll tell you as a coach, it's terrible. The student brings me a game, 15-minute game or something. I don't want to look at that. Guy didn't think about it at all. We're going to spend more than 15 minutes looking at the game, We're going to spend probably an hour looking at the game. So maybe more. And so the thing I want to stress is it's okay if it feels like it's going to take a long time to get those classical games in. There'll be other things to do. Let's say, for example, myself, I play in an over-the-board tournament over weekends. I get 5 or 6 games. It's going to take me a while to do those games, right? It's going to take me a while. And if I run out, there's other things in the program. If I finish, I should say, if I run out of games to review, there's other things in the program for me to do. So I'm okay with these various translations of the time controls at the lower end, but I do want to stress that it's important. It's an important cornerstone of the program. By the way, of all the cornerstones in the program, the game analysis has worked out the best. You just look at our database, and the analysis that people are bringing in is astounding. And you need to play a long game to have the meat to really have something to look at later on. Okay, you've heard that spiel before. There it is, man. There it is.
Yeah. Okay. A couple points I wanted to add. So, yeah, number one, like going with the fitness metaphor again, it's like you can't lift a 10-pound weight 3 times and say it's the same as lifting a 30-pound weight, right? Okay. It's a different thing. And so it's like, yeah, it's nice to get kind of like reps in, right, with like lower weights. And I think rapid chess is fun. I think rapid chess can be useful. But yeah, if you're not going like super deep, it's really hard to get that strength, that actual like increasing your ability to calculate and play the game. I think speed chess, I've said this before, but I think speed chess is great for just kind of like seeing where you're at, like your current form, whether you're like seeing tactics, whether you're kind of like familiar with an opening or if you're like struggling. It's like kind of a good like testing area for stuff, but I don't think it's necessarily great for improvement. On the topic of kind of checking stuff off. So yeah, the thing is like to graduate in the program, it's all about the rating. So if you gain rating playing OTB events at like slightly shorter time controls at what we have, but like FIDE still counts as classical or USCF or whatever, you can still graduate, you can still continue. But yeah, I mean, I think people like checking off boxes, and you have Jesse on stream yelling at people that they're not checking off boxes, right? So people do want to kind of like engage with and like participate in the program. They feel excluded if they're playing serious classical games, but then they can't submit them to the database. They can't like cross off that this counts for something. So I don't know. My feeling is that there should be, I would put in like an OTB exemption, right? So for example, like a 90 plus 5 versus 90 plus 30. Like to me, I think if you're playing that OTB, then I don't know. I think that should count. Or if you're in like the 12 to 1600 group, and you're playing like a G60 plus 5 rather than G60 plus 30, because G60 plus 30, that doesn't really exist OTB. At least I haven't seen it. If it's a G60, it's usually going to be like a 5 second delay or maybe 10 second delay, at best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
boss. David's shaking his head, which means the hardliner's just going to carry the day over here.
all right, well that's fine. I just want to say that would be my recommendation. I would put in for an OTB exemption. You guys can veto it. That's fine. But
Yeah, no,
but then no one's allowed to complain to me, all right, in the Discord.
Yeah, sure. You position yourself to be the good cop. We see how you did it. No, it's true. Kostya is always on this side in our internal arguments as well, off stream. But concessions were made and a line has been drawn.
That's
You
right.
know, like what you're looking at right now is already extremely concessionized. So it's not going any lower than that, And if somebody can graduate and make their rating points playing OTB games that are faster than the ones we count, then good for them. They can graduate and they don't need to finish off their classical game requirement. But if they don't make it, maybe it's because their games weren't long enough and they need to keep working at it. And that's just where it is.
Right. And I just want to stress one thing. I am fine. Yeah. If you want to play some rapid events, there's some cool rapid event on the weekend, play it. Yeah, for sure. I'm not saying you shouldn't. And the thing is to say about our program is that most people are going to advance to the next level before they finish the requirements. And that's the hope. And really what's going to happen though, at some point, might be at 1,000, might be at 1,800, might be at 2,300. You will reach a plateau. And what the program is designed to do is, if you hit that hard wall, the program is designed to say, look, you've hit the hard wall. Now you're going to do all these things. And we're trying to say that you can have a good shot at making it over the barrier. Right. And everybody's barrier is different, but everybody does have a barrier. And that's what the program is designed to do. So 30 classical games for the guy I just read sounds like a lot, but imagine you really are at the limits of your chess ability. You are going to need to do those things. It's not going to be just like, some easy walk in the park. And we're seeing that a lot of people in the Discord, in our program, and we see it in Discord. I said Discord because I did an announcement today of people who've graduated. A lot of people are graduating within a month or two of the program. That's great. And that's the way it was intended to be. But like they will eventually hit some kind of wall where it will be frustrating and they're going to have to do all the things in the program.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, quick correction. We didn't intend for people to jump 100 points in like 1 or 2 months.
No, I'm just saying that is definitely not what hopefully that's not what I said.
That's what it sounded like, yeah.
No, but
it happens sometimes, but that's also partly like we often encourage people to put themselves in the slightly conservative band if they're right on the edge between two bands, right? It's like, well,
yeah,
you'd rather go, 10 points.
But what I'm
gain
saying is
points.
there's a lot of people who have come into the program and they've done the work. And I can definitely tell you, as somebody who's like doing this little announcements for people who've graduated, the people who are checking the boxes are making the progress. It's a really linear relationship. And what I'm trying to say is a lot of people who who aren't at their plateau are using the program, and boom, they're making very quick progress quickly. Right? That's what I meant to say. Right. But at some point, those people are going to hit a plateau. I don't know when it is, but they will hit it eventually.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was a good point about how concessions, that is true, have already been made when we designed our time control list: 30-15, 45-15, 60-30, 90-30. I think we had to drag Jesse down to 30 plus 15, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Right.
Even the 45s. Yeah, that was not. So yeah, it's not like. Right. It's not like there hasn't already been some compromise here.
Right. I mean, it was I think I agreed with dragging down the time control for the like under 1200s pretty significantly, right? So we've got 45 minutes and 30 minutes for the under 800s. And that was from my experience of like running dojo tournaments and seeing people play a game with like 30 seconds off their clock, regardless of whether the starting time control is 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So I thought, 30 minutes is enough where they can work on trying to spend 20 out of those 30 minutes instead of 1 out of those 30 minutes. Like there's a lot of room for growth there already for, a 400 rated player who's only played like a couple non-blitz games until they join us.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of kids start out playing like these G30s, G25s as well. So I feel like it's a very natural kind of longer time control um, to start with. Okay, so it sounds like we're not shifting the time control requirement. It sounds like there's just no change on this one. But we at least sympathize with the people that that have
Yeah.
issues with it.
I mean,
Um,
anybody who's getting to go play in like a club, I'm not just sympathizing with them. I'm very happy for them, even if they don't get to check a box every Tuesday. If they're playing a classical game every Tuesday or a semi-classical game, I mean, that's fun, that's great. And it's like in person and they're probably getting to talk to other chess players. I mean, it's glorious.
And let's also say that we have these amazing tournaments that we're scheduling, and they're classical tournaments, and the one's one game a week. And let's say you want to buy for that week, that's fine. You can take the buy if you can't make it, but that's a one game a week is more than enough, especially if you really want to do the work of analyzing it. For sure, one
Yeah.
game's. Yeah.
Well, I would just say I think for like the under 800s, they need to be playing more games
That's fine.
probably,
Yeah,
but the shorter time control also makes it easier for them to get in more games in a week. They don't need a 3 or 4 hour chunk of time to play a single game.
right, right.
Actually, maybe at this point we could transition to the scheduling topic because I
Okay.
think that's kind of
Yeah.
related here. Yeah, so we were talking about scheduling before the break, and I was just saying that it still is an issue for members because it's not that easy to schedule games. Some people have trouble with like Discord, but also it's kind of like uh, most people need kind of notice, set up ahead of time if they're going to play a classical game online, and so that's not always easy to organize. So we are working on that. We got someone who's like trying to develop a scheduling app that looks really cool, but we don't know when it's going to be ready. And we have taken steps with the tournaments. Like we've started to divide them into sections based on time zones. Like an
Hmm.
Eastern and Western hemisphere type thing. I think that's helped a little bit, but I don't think it's fully solved the issues for everyone. Also, not everyone wants to play the tournaments exactly, so they kind of want a simpler way to schedule games. So I think one solution for that I definitely want to actually start working on is to just kind of try to run more inter cohort tournaments where people can play against others within their cohort, and then it should be easier to kind of schedule and set up. But yeah, so the one issue there is, I think we brought this up last time, like we don't want our members just constantly playing against each other. We also want them going out into the real world and playing other people in the chess community, that because otherwise we're going to get a situation where everyone's studying like the same repertoires and just like playing each other all the time. It's a little bit odd. So we definitely don't just want people just playing against each other all the time, but we also want them to go out and take the rating points of the outside world. Okay, do you guys want to jump in on scheduling or?
Yeah, I just want to briefly say, yeah, it's been a surprising challenge. Like we conquered so many other challenges in the dojo, but the scheduling has been a surprisingly hard tech issue. But I definitely think splitting the tournament so that you have European and American time zones, basically, very helpful. And then our new classrooms, I think, is going to make it much easier for people to get together to do sparring, opening sparring, end game sparring, and then also like looking at classical games, looking at other people's games that they've played. I'm really hopeful that those are going to make that easier. Yeah, but that's new. Yeah.
Okay. Um, should we move on to the next topic?
Sure.
And that is the question of the program, I
Cumulative.
think.
Let,
Right.
let's
I
call
think
it
there's another
cumulative.
one that's related to what we just said that it might be good to go in order, but you
Okay.
say what you
Go
say.
ahead.
Like,
Go ahead.
I'm thinking maybe like finding training partners or stronger players to look at your games or a low rated player whose games you can look at. That's also kind of like a coordination
Yeah.
issue similar to this one.
Mm-hmm. Right. That is something, yeah, I feel like we maybe want to promote a little bit more is just kind of like right, people working together doing more game analysis with one another. We just recently released our classrooms, which I think have started off well, and now there's like a lot more study sessions going on. But yeah, it would be nice to encourage more like game review. And I think one feedback I really felt for was, when like people submit games and they ask for feedback, and then they don't really get anything of substance. Someone just writes like, "Yeah, good analysis, good job," and then that's kind of it. And then maybe they were they spent several hours on it. They were hoping for maybe a little bit more critique. So it would be cool for us to kind of find a way to encourage the community to, kind of like really actually look at each other's games a little bit more concretely, right? And actually like try to provide like, real feedback or real thoughts. So I don't know how exactly to do that, but yeah, I think that would just be great for everyone.
Here's one idea I had last night. You guys can tell me if it seems interesting or has a major hole. My idea is that people would actually have to put into, let's say, the scoreboard, or they would have to enter the information somewhere. They'd have to put the username of one training partner from their cohort, the name of one like plus who was going to help them sometimes, and the name of one minus, if applicable. This wouldn't be for like, the 0 to 400 cohort, right? But if it's within their band, one minus who they were going to like help or look at their games sometimes. And then on top of that, what we would do is like, if you didn't pick somebody yourself within a certain amount of time, let's say a month or 2 weeks, then we would pair you with somebody. Like we would just say, here's an unpaired person who needs another person, and boom, we would just do it.
Yeah, that would be the dream.
Is a little despotic, but I kind of like, and I was say, I was saying on my stream earlier today, I feel like the one, like if you imagine the training program having 3 pillars, right? Game analysis, having a structure, and then plus minus equal, right? Somebody above you, a cohort, and below you. I feel like the plus minus equal has been the hardest thing and the most unsuccessful of those 3 pillars. So that's definitely something that I think if we had a scheduling app, it would help, right? And a lot of people in the feedback are saying, I like this a lot. They're like, well, I don't have someone necessarily above me to work with me. I don't have like some kind of personal touch, someone looking at me. I don't have, and a lot of people have submitted games and they've had higher rated players look at them, but not everybody. So a lot of times, you do this hard work in the annotation and then you submit it, and then it's crickets, which is understandable. There's a lot of people submitting games, right? But if we can in any way facilitate that interaction between the plus and the minus, it's whereas the cohorts are really going great. It's the plus and the minus where it gets tricky, right? And so I want to say, one, that we have a bunch of coaches that you can pay, and that's not a dumb thing. They are familiar with the program, but of course, not everybody wants to pay for a coach. I get it. And there are then people above you who can help you, but facilitating that is difficult. And I think also that it's hard for people to understand that teaching is a very powerful form of self-improvement in their own game, just being able to articulate. So if you imagine somebody from a higher band holding a group class about almost anything, whether it was an opening or an endgame position, that them having to articulate what's going on in that position and then answer questions and answer them in a way that's coherent to the people who are maybe 400 points below them, very helpful.
Yeah,
right? So definitely think that's something we need.
Sorry, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I've learned so much about how much I don't know in the King's Indian from like working on this course. It's like, you have to like present the material. It's like, yeah, you learn a lot of stuff about what actually you don't know or like not clear about, because yeah, I mean, it's no, I think that's very insightful. So yeah, I think we just have to kind of maybe try to come up with some better incentives, because there are quite a few actually members in the program that are on the higher end that don't mind at all offering feedback, but okay, they can't do it for like 800 people below them, right? So yeah, it's it has to be kind of right, like I think more involved. Um, but yeah, in general, I would say, I mean, that's also another thing we've been discussing recently, has been trying to get more just high rated players into the program, period.
Yeah.
Which is definitely something we've been working on. We've been inviting folks and stuff. So I'm hoping that will also kind of improve things as well.
Yep.
Right.
Jesse mentioned like a piece of feedback we got from 2 or 3 people at least, that like when you put in a lot of effort on your annotation and don't get any response from anybody, whether they be somebody in your cohort or somebody stronger than you or whatever, um, it feels bad. Like you would even want to have somebody just say like, "Oh, nice work, man," like even just that, right? No substantive feedback, but even just that. I was thinking an idea for that is we could put like an extra task where you need to go, put some comments on other people's analysis. And we've got that in some bands that you have to put like one comment, but maybe we could like up that requirement, give you like 10 different boxes to check for, just going around and
Yeah,
commenting
and
on
we can
people's
also
games.
make them more creative, because I would definitely fear that we're just gonna get spam, not spam, but just people just, just writing whatever. But we can make the task more creative, just like find a mistake in someone's analysis, and then they really have to kind of dig for that, and that's not something that they can just phone in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so we are kind of approaching, I think, our time limit here, but we did want to talk about this
We
topic
got to talk
of,
about the cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
right,
topic.
It's a
this,
really big one.
yeah, this idea that the program can have material that is cumulative, meaning like right now the way it's structured is you have your rating band, you have the work that you're doing in that band, and we're not really asking you to do anything before that, anything in the lower rating bands, unless like you complete everything and then you still feel like you don't really know your end games, for example. Then we would suggest like go back and go through some of the end games in the previous bands. So yeah, there's this question of which of the material should be cumulative, because we have the endgame algorithms, things like king and queen checkmate, bishop and knight checkmate, things like that, things you kind of like study and understand. We have the endgame sparring positions, middle game and opening sparring positions as well. Then we have the games to memorize, which I think would be hard to force that on people, but maybe some people want access to that list if they're interested in all these like great games. And then of course we have the games to study, which is like 20 to 30, and then it increases number of classic games per band. That's one that, yeah, I definitely think makes sense. Could be cumulative, because it's like, yeah, if you're 1400 and okay, they were studying Steinitz's games in the 1200 band, like I think those games are still going to be useful for you, for example.
Definitely.
So yeah, it's a really interesting suggestion. I think we were discussing this originally, like when we were just designing the structure of the program. This was always an option. So yeah, personally, I feel like for the in-game algorithms, I think it makes a lot of sense. Actually, if you guys remember, originally I had this idea where I wanted to categorize the endgames like level one endgames, which is basically like the first 5 or 10 endgames in our list of endgame algorithms. And I wanted to be like, all right, all levels have to know these level one endgames, right? Like everyone has to know how to mate with like king and queen, for example. And then maybe you could have level two endgames that are a little bit more advanced. And then if you're 1,000 and up, then you need to know all level two endgames as well as the level one endgames.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of one suggestion that I think makes sense. There are different ways we can structure it, but I think it definitely makes sense that, yeah, as you're going up the rating ladder, you still got to know how to mate with the king and rook, bishop and knight, like all that stuff is necessary, even if you joined at a later rating.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see a reason why for almost all of this material we would not create like a reference point where anyone can go and see what was in the bands before them and then go over it if they want to optionally.
Yeah, I think, okay, so I would say that where it's important in a cumulative sense is especially with the end game algorithm. So if you get thrown into the 1900 group and you might not know various of these end game algorithms, there might be some kind of metric where we say, all right, you have to do the 4 before. of the 4 previous bands. And the reason not all of the bands is at the beginning. If you're at 1800, I think you can mate with a rook or a queen, right? But the other bands, right, there would be things that we would want you to like have solid knowledge of. So there's that, where I can imagine the cumulative being very effective, and that basically we just be adding requirements to certain layers of, let's say in this case, the endgame algorithm. And then I want to say for our own band, the 2400 band, I think one of the things that's odd is there's a lot of books in the previous band that I feel like, oh, I mean, I've read them because I partly, was the one recommending them, but I'm like, right, all of these books, I feel like, you know, it's not like we just, especially at the higher bands, it's not just one book. Buddy, you need to be reading a lot of books, man.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be absorbing a lot of material. And so it's there where I can imagine really more, especially from the prior bands. For example, I think with calculation, for the higher bands, Perfect Your Chess and The Best Move, books like that are just fantastic, and it should be, there's a kind of cumulative effect there. So that's my 2 cents on it. I think it wouldn't be that hard to do a small incremental change on this with in terms of the endgame algorithms and the books. But the whole cumulative thing, which a lot of people are suggesting, I'm not sure I get. It doesn't make intuitive sense to me.
I mean, the whole cumulative thing is there's a body of knowledge
Right.
that ultimately you all need to have, right? So like
Right.
if we've practiced some end game at the 1100 level with an extra outside pass pawn and learned how to use an extra outside pass pawn to win an end game, and there's somebody who made it up to 1600 on their tactics and just never really worked on their end games, right? Like they're going to have some kind of a hole there. And so the idea is which elements of the training program are part of a full body of knowledge that everyone should eventually get, and then how do we present that so that people who come in with different strengths and weaknesses can go find and fill up the things that they missed because we would have recommended them at a lower level. It's not the only order or level at which people could learn those things.
Right.
Yeah, it's a tricky question because there's certainly a lot of very strong players that didn't really look at a lot of like romantic games, for example, games from the 19th, 18th centuries, and we have those like in the program. But yeah, I would be hard pressed to say that, oh yeah, it's like necessary to look at these. I think it's a good idea personally. I think learning all the classics makes sense, but people can get really, really strong and not really study a lot of those older games. So yeah, it's a question like what exactly we want to maybe make mandatory. Like I think for the end games, I think we want to be really clear because there's certainly a lot of people that join at 1700 and maybe they don't know the end game work before them. I think part of that is covered. I'll have to check this, but we have this Silman endgame book requirement, and I think part of the requirement for certain levels is to like read up to a certain part, so you're not just reading like that one like because it's a very long book, so you're not just reading like part 3, which is maybe like 100 150 pages, but you're also reading parts 1 and 2, or at least skimming parts 1 and 2 for stuff that you don't know. And that can be with the end games. I think that's definitely something that people can well, obviously it's all self-police, but you probably know whether like the different checkmates or if like a theoretical endgame or not, right? So I think that one makes a lot of sense. And I think for the other stuff, yeah, I would just say like maybe we should just make it more available. Just have like a PGN for people that or just like a page or listing somewhere where people can just see the different games, the full list of games to memorize. I think we're at least working on it, or we've started to put up all the different sparring positions, like end game, middle game, sparring positions. At least those links are available for people to look at. But yeah, maybe some kind of extra credit system. So yeah, there is this point, I don't know if we mentioned yet, but we have these sparring arenas where we rotate the positions, and people play different endgame positions, but it might not be the ones for their band. So it's still useful. It's still a very useful game. I mean, David and I have played a bunch of those endgame positions on Endgame Sensei, even though they're on
Yeah.
like, the 1200 band, 1400 band, whatever. And all those games have been very useful for us. So
Yeah.
I think it's
Not
a,
flawlessly. We had things to learn.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think it would make sense to maybe somehow design a way, maybe like a progress bar or something, where it's like, okay, you have your main sparring positions for your band, but then if you go and play out some of these other end games, maybe you get some kind of at least some credit for that. Again, I mean, when it comes to like the big picture, graduating means your rating went up. So whether you did some
Yeah.
sparring or whatever, whether it counted or not, ultimately it's all about your rating. But it would be fun to just kind of give people something to check off if they do that work.
Yeah. To me, I'm not sure what extra credit is. Like the goal is just to get some rating points, eventually by actually increasing your strength. I would
Yeah,
suggest
extra credit
making
doesn't really
all of
exist
this
in our system.
optional, right? Like I
Hmm.
would suggest making it all optional and basically directing people like, hey, there's like, these three reasons. If you run into one of these reasons, like go do this extra material, right? One is you check everything off and you haven't graduated. Okay, go back, right? Another is you've noticed that you've got some kind of weakness, right? Like, for example, in your classical games in your cohort, you score 50-50, but in the end game sparring, you score like 10%. So it's like, there's our weakness, right? Or you do everything like well, but your tactics score is like 15 away from where you're supposed to be, or 10 away from where you're supposed to be on the puzzle rush or the other markers, right? So anytime you find some kind of weakness, it's like, hey, maybe go check the cumulative in that area up to your level, right? So check the tactics up to your level, go back and do, I guess you force everybody to do the Polgar mates, but like, if you were telling people to do mates 200 to 300, it'd be like, hey, go back and do 0 to 200 as well, right? Go back and do the sparring positions you haven't done, do the algorithms. And then the final reason would just be interest, right? It's just like, if you're looking for something cool to do, like go back and check out the Steinitz games from the band below you, or the Morphe games, for fun, but also it's useful.
Let me just say, people don't like optional, and I understand. It creates anxiety. It creates anxiety. It's like, should I do it or should I don't? I've always been against anything that sounds optional. And the other thing is an admonishment to myself and to us, I think, is it's easy to add stuff. It's always easy to add stuff. And so I'm I think like anything that we're talking about today, it makes sense. We could add it, but we don't. Yeah, we want to be very deliberate, I think, about not adding too much. In the same way, Kostya, this is a complaint. It's a separate complaint, but it's similar. We got too many channels now, buddy, on the training program. It's just a proliferation. We're getting too many channels. People are talking about it in the comments. I get it too. My boomer GM mind can't deal with it. It's too much.
Hmm.
So like as an example, we have to keep the program as efficient and like dialed down as possible.
Yeah, yeah, I'll have to look at that. I mean, we recently kind of like streamlined it a bit. But yeah, actually, sorry, to Jesse's point. One thing I wanted to say. Um, oh boy, sorry, man, you threw that last thing and it totally, it totally blew me
About
off.
things being optional, Kostya?
Yeah, so the optional thing, right? The other danger is that it gives people another thing to do other than their main weakness that they need to work on, right? So if they have a main weakness that they're ignoring, and then they're instead spending 6 months going through all the classic games in the different bands because that's what they like
Yeah.
doing, but they're never working on their like calculation or whatever. So that's kind of a danger. So we just have to. I like the idea of optional but available, where it's like it's there for people that are just curious or want to see the previous games, or they've never studied some Morphe games and now they have a chance to go and look at them, or they want to participate in a study session, because the cohorts are kind of, we have these like 400-point rating bands for the classrooms, and so if a cohort's going through some games, maybe you want to go and join in. I think that's totally fine. So yeah, we just have to. It goes back to our earlier point about highlighting what's important and what should be the focus and what people should be spending their time on. So as long as people are clear, it's like, here's the stuff you got to work on. Here's the stuff that you can do just for fun or for interest or whatever. If you're
Or
at a
because you've
plateau,
identified that that's your weakness, right?
yeah, that's the most
then we're
important
not
thing.
distracting you or taking away from doing your weakness. We're like, you're clearly doing worse in middle game sparring than in end game sparring, or worse in opening sparring than in middle game sparring, or whatever. Like, you find a weakness, and then we say, hey, those are the people who should go back and cover like previous material.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely quite a few people that are certainly their level goes down specifically in the end game. As soon as like there's like fewer pieces on the board, it's just like something there's just something, you know, off, or just not enough experience. And yeah, I think those folks definitely could stand to do a lot more end game sparring, even just going through all the different positions. So yeah, I think there's definitely some points there. I feel like we have to make it available, but also recognize that yeah, it's not like, yeah, it doesn't have the same importance as some of the other stuff in someone's specific rating.